Hi friends, my name is Gloria and welcome back to another video. As you can see, I'm in a different location. I'm actually in front of my nonfiction bookshelf. Usually I'm in front of the other one, which is filled with all my fiction books. It used to all be combined, but then I started acquiring way too many books this year, so I had to move some to this shelf. So today's video, as you can already tell by the title, I'm going to just walk through all of the nonfiction books that I have given 5 stars to. There's not too many. I haven't been reading that much for that long, but I've read a lot of nonfiction over the past several years, and some have been absolute standouts. So I'll just be going through the list, pull some books off my shelves if I own them, and talk about them. I hope everyone's nonfiction November is going well if you are participating. I've so far been loving all of the books that I've been reading this month. Yeah, I just wanted to make a little fun video for you guys. So the first 3 books have a theme. Loveology, God, Love, Marriage, Sex, and the Never-Ending Story of Male and Female by John Mark Comer. The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller. And A Love Letter Life by Jeremy and Audrey Roloff. I read all 3 of these around the time that I started dating my husband. I did read Loveology like way before I ever met him. All 3 of these books, particularly Loveology and The Meaning of Marriage, really helped me understand and like shape my understanding of love and marriage and kind of how God intended that to be. And yeah, I loved all 3 of these. Loveology specifically is probably the one that shaped me the most, and especially as an adolescent, kind of growing up and dating and figuring out what that looks like. Yeah, I've actually thought about doing a whole video about like books that I read when I was dating, or books that I recommend reading before you start dating someone, because these are all helpful and good things to know before you jump in with all of the feelings and all of the stuff. These were all very helpful, and yeah, loved reading them. The next 3 are along the same theme. They are all Christian nonfiction. This one was my most recent read. I finished it in October. 10 Words to Live by Jen Wilkin, kind of going through what the 10 Commandments meant to the Israelites and what they mean to us today. The other one I read this year, The Imperfect Disciple by Jared C. Wilson, Grace for people who can't get their act together. Loved this one, loved reading it along with friends and kind of going through the chapters and discussing different themes. This one was a favorite last year, How to Pray, A Simple Guide for Normal People. A really good introduction to praying and what it's all about and all the different styles of prayer that you can do and how to do it if you are unfamiliar with it. The next one is not explicitly Christian or religious, but the author is a believer, I believe, and that is All Along You Were Blooming, Thoughts for Boundless Living, a collection of poetry from Morgan Harper Nichols. Read this in the summer and I absolutely loved this beautiful illustrated collection of poetry, and this book makes a great gift. I love picking it up at random times, picking a poem and kind of thinking on it and its meaning. Love this one. I should probably stop saying that because all of these are 5-star reads, which probably means that I love them all. An absolute game changer and favorite of last year was Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams by Matthew Walker. I read this book alongside with my husband. We read a little bit each night before we went to bed. Man, this book was such a game changer in understanding why sleep is important, why we should be getting sleep, how to really change your kind of routine and rhythm to fit what your circadian rhythm is naturally doing and what's really important to get good sleep, and really everything that will go wrong and break down and how your body really cannot function properly without good sleep. We absolutely love this book, an incredible resource. We will definitely be rereading this, and let's just say that both of us value sleep so much. It is such a high priority for us. I don't know how I did it in college, but I'm no longer someone that can function on less than really 7 hours of sleep. Anything less than 7 hours, I can't like do anything the next day. So really looking forward to having kids someday and that being all messed up. I feel like I mentioned this book in every single one of my videos, but that is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This was a favorite read for me earlier this year and absolutely loved it. A very infuriating read. It will just make you so mad of how our justice system works. But this is all about Bryan Stevenson's work with death row inmates and how they are wrongfully accused and then committed and put on death row. And he follows a very specific case of a man wrongfully convicted in Alabama in the 1980s, but also his other work with juveniles in the prison system. Fantastic read. Can't stop talking about how good this book is. A couple memoirs that are fantastic. Night by Elie Wiesel. Fantastic, very short little read. I read this in school and I remember loving it and it being very impactful, and I reread it recently and it's still a really good read and very hard as well, about a man in a concentration camp and him surviving that experience and all of the heartache that he had to experience and really his own kind of battling his faith. Does God really exist if all of this evil exists? but it was a fantastic read and totally understandable why it's like required school reading for most. Another memoir that everyone seems to love, well, almost everyone, is Educated by Tara Westover. This was really popular everywhere a couple of years back, I think, at this point, and I read this last year and absolutely loved it. Very fantastic book about a woman who grew up in a very intense religious Mormon community who were like doomsday preppers, and her father didn't let any of the kids get an education or go to school. He didn't believe in the government and thought the government's just like feeding you lies, and she kind of breaks away from that family, and there's a lot of trauma in that, and then she pursues an education. I thought it was incredible to dive into her story. Another super popular one, Becoming by Michelle Obama. I listened to this book as an audiobook, which I think is how it should be consumed because Michelle Obama tells her story in her own voice, and it's brilliant. You don't even need me to say anything about it. It's incredible and everyone thinks so. Another fantastic memoir I read this year was Stranger Care by Sarah Sentilles, and this is taking a look at a woman and her husband trying out the foster care system and trying to adopt through the foster care system, which is kind of complicated, and that is not really what foster care is all about, but she didn't fully know that going into it, and it's really taking a look at like motherhood and what it means to care and love for something, and also kind of just like internally working through a lot of trauma and a lot of like messed up stuff that exists in the foster care system and her singular experience. But I thought it was really well written. I don't know if this is technically a memoir, but I really loved the graphic novel A Fire Story by Bryan Fies. This is a nonfiction graphic novel. The author is a cartoonist and an illustrator, and he writes about his and his family's experiences losing their home to the, I believe, 2017 California wildfires and the crazy kind of events that happened. And there's a lot of like themes on loss, losing your home and what it means to like lose all your possessions. It was beautifully well done, and I would definitely recommend. A few more recent reads for me. I finished The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett M. Graff. This one I read in September for the 20th anniversary of September 11th. What an incredible book. Also must be paired with the audiobook. Reading the physical book along with the audiobook was an incredible experience. Absolutely just heart-wrenching, like just tears and everything. But oh my goodness, this book helped me have such a better perspective of what happened on 9/11. I was way too young during the events of 9/11 to really remember anything that happened, and I'm on the West Coast, so I was like asleep when everything happened, and this book was beautifully put together from all of the different perspectives of people on the ground, in the sky, in DC, in different places around the world, what the president was doing, what the military was doing. Obviously very, very tough to read, but a fantastic book. I also recently read and loved Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. A really enlightening book to me about how our caste system works here in America, but then she also gave really good examples of the caste system in India, as well as kind of like Hitler's idea of how he wanted to create the caste system for understanding the Aryan race and then everyone that's below that. She also gave anecdotes from her own personal experiences with racism and sexism, and yeah, this one was also a fantastic book. Speaking of Nazis, another 5-star read for me was The Faithful Spy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the Plot to Kill Hitler by John Hendrix. This is also a graphic novel, I think geared more towards younger readers, although my library put it in the adult section. It was really well done for me. I didn't really know much about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a German theologian, but he was not on board with Hitler and the side of the Nazis, and him and his family did get involved politically in some kind of underground plot movements to try to kill Hitler. But I really loved how this book told a story and gave a really good perspective of what was going on economically and politically in Germany and how Hitler came to power. Fantastic graphic novel. Love this one. Another one on the subject is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. This is about a woman who survived concentration camps and her time during World War II, as well as her family's. She was in Amsterdam, and her family were hiding Jews in their home, and then they were eventually caught and captured and sent to the concentration camps. This book was beautiful, also made me cry. It was just so incredible to read about a woman who has so much strength and like fierce love, and also complete trust in God being like the ultimate protector, even in the most worst circumstances anyone can experience. It was absolutely beautiful to listen to her story. It was written beautifully and I loved it. Another nonfiction 5-star read for me was Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man by Emmanuel Ocho. This book was also a fantastic audiobook because the author narrates it himself, and he actually has a podcast that was the original kind of format, and he turned the podcast or conversations from that that podcast into this book, which I thoroughly enjoyed and learned a lot. And it was really that. You were really just like listening to a conversation, a very like casual conversation about hard topics with a person who is Black and his experience with racism and just where our culture is at large right now and all of the conversations that people are having around race. And I really enjoyed this one. I don't know if it's quite a classic, but I feel like it might be. 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff. I read this earlier this year and absolutely loved it, like many others do. This is an epistolary novel, which is usually not my forte. I really haven't read that much to know if I like it or don't like it, but I loved this one. And I'm actually kind of surprised with how much I loved it, but it was truly just like a very heartwarming read. It was a happy read. It was like a hug. This book is a hug, but it's really just a collection of letters between a woman in New York and this bookshop owner in London. And she wanted to acquire some books that she couldn't find in New York, and so they start a letter exchange, and it goes on for like 20+ years, and you meet different people, and it just was very sweet. It was light, it was happy, and very easy read. It was like a very short book. It's like the epitome of a little happy book. A popular one that's also kind of been all over the place is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I read this also earlier this year and loved it. This is Chanel Miller's side of the story of her experience as a sexual assault victim in the Stanford sexual assault case, and she really goes through everything that happened from her actual experience of sexual assault to what happened afterwards, to the trial and all of the different trauma, both physically, emotionally, and everything that was going on behind the scenes. She was only known as Jane Doe, and really no one knew who she was or her side of the story at all, not even during the trial, because I don't think legally people are allowed to know that. But yeah, this book was also very, very hard on the heart, very hard to listen to, very infuriating, very intense, but it was stunningly written, just beautifully written, and also a great audiobook because Chanel Miller narrates it herself. And I just think this is a very important read to read as a woman, and I have not ever experienced sexual assault, though for me it was just feel like it was important to just sit and empathize with someone who has and just hear her story. And finally, I'll mention American Kingpin by Nick Bilton. And this was really like the first nonfiction book, narrative nonfiction, that got me excited about nonfiction reading. And I don't really even know why I decided to pick this book up. It was originally recommended by Casey Neistat back in the day when I used to watch all his vlogs, and he recommended this book in one of his videos, and I just got it off of Libby and decided to listen to it, or Overdrive at that time before Libby was a thing. And this was a fantastic book. It's all about the Silk Road, which is like this underground dark web black market of free trade where people used it to buy guns and sell drugs and even probably like human trafficking, all of the really like terrible and not good things. But about this one young guy who created that free marketplace, and it was just a very fascinating and deep dive into that world. And I just remember being completely like engrossed and enthralled in the story. I think I'm due for a reread because it's been quite a while and I don't really remember all of the details at this point because it's been a long time, but I loved this book. So I'm hoping it's still just as good as I remember it. So yeah, those are most of the nonfiction books that I gave 5 stars to. I'm sure that I'm missing a few, but those are the ones that I can remember from the top of my head, and thanks to my Goodreads. So now that you know what some of my absolute favorite ones are, based on those, please recommend any down below that you think would match my reading tastes. I love a good book recommendation, so don't hesitate to leave any down below. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, watching, supporting this channel, all the lovely things, and I will see you guys in another book video soon. Bye!